How are we all doing tonight?
Good. Excited to get started.
Right on. Well, welcome to our, I guess, second official meeting, our first one untethered, as it were. I think what we should probably do, understanding that we made kind of the agreement last time around to do most of the voting by consensus. It still might make sense to just go around and make sure everybody's okay with last, even though they're not the level of note taking in meeting notes that the meeting minutes that obviously Marianne is going to do. Has everyone read the meeting minutes? And if so, Ian, I think what would we do here? We'd ask for a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes.
Yeah, you can also often with the select board, members might have comments on the minutes, and so you'd make a motion to approve the minutes with the changes submitted or the comments or corrections submitted. And then it just allows you to, instead of keep going back to getting exact minutes, it allows you to publish it and keep going each week or every month, to have accurate minutes on the website.
So we have a question. About that. One of the other committees has asked us for a copy of our meeting notes or minutes, and they meet, unfortunately, so we're the fourth Thursday of every month. They meet on the fifth, or the first Monday or Tuesday, which wouldn't give us necessarily time to codify the meeting minutes. What should we do in that case then?
It's fine to put up a draft. Oftentimes for the select board, because the minute taking is extensive,
yep.
We often put up a draft that might not be finalized or approved, but by law, I think you have to put up a draft within 5 days or something like that. So, and you were very quick with the notes from last time, which thank you very much for doing that. And I think as long as you get it within a few days and you've got them, post them, and then you can share them and just put draft on them so people know.
Perfect. That's what we'll do. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve last meeting's minutes? And anyone can say motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Dustin Corrigan.
Seconded. And then anybody can second it, and then
Second it.
Perfect. Great. So last meeting's minutes are approved. Let's see. Let's see where we're starting today. Okay, so call to order, 7 o'clock.
Come back.
Sorry. I'm sorry, did somebody have something?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So we're calling the meeting to order of the Bristol Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Second meeting. Our first order of business is the village speed limit. I'd love to pick up where both the last meeting as well as the work of the ad hoc committee left off. And this obviously dovetails with a couple other things that we're doing. One is the liaison list, which includes people who had been involved in that process, specifically Chief Nason. Is there any, Ian, since you're on the line here, is there any movement that's happened since the last meeting that we should be aware of, or anything you want to tell us as far as what anybody was thinking about a timeline for that we want to either fold into or speed up or assist with in any way?
No movement as such. I think the select board is focusing on just the informational meetings for town meeting and then the voting. So we haven't made any motion on that. We're sort of looking to you, since this was the recommendation to sort of create this committee. I think we would wait for the committee's recommendations for any kind of projects coming out of this. One of those being the speed limit. I think the main thing that we were looking at for the speed limit, and this would be up to this committee to decide, would be, do we want to go ahead and use the select board's power to change the speed limit in the areas that we can change, make that decision official, have signs replaced, and then go ahead later and work with the state in terms of lowering the 116 corridor, or do you do those things together? So that would be up to you to sort of recommend. And I think either way is good. Obviously, with the first one, you can make that decision fairly quickly, But with the latter for the state part of it, it's going to take a little bit longer. So it'd be up to you to decide.
Got it. Okay, so to the group, I'd like to suggest I'll volunteer, and I'd love for somebody else to ride shotgun or help out in any way with this. I will reach out to Chief Nason and just introduce ourselves to him. Say that, you know, we're now an official group. First item on our list as far as things to do is to get the conversation going about lowering the village speed limit, see what his take is on it, and then go from there. Ian, we'll look to, you know, we will obviously look to inform the select board of our process or of our progress. But I think also, you know, I don't want to be arbitrary about this, but it might be, given that spring's around the corner, it might be something that we might want to move quickly on, if that's possible at all. You know, I don't know how slow the wheels are going to turn as far as changing signs and things like that, but it might be great to start getting a run on it right now. And I think the place to start there is with Chief Nason and possibly someone in the Public Works Department.
Yep, I think that's a good way of doing it.
Jerry.
Jim, you're still on the board of the police department, aren't you? Jim? Oh, he's on.
No, that's been disbanded at my request 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd have more understanding of Chief. I thought that Chief Neeson was up on this or supportive of the 25.
He is.
already.
He is. I want
okay.
to introduce him to the group here.
Yeah,
Let him
yeah,
know that
that's
this
cool.
is shifted over from the ad hoc group into a formal committee with the running under the shield of the select board.
Yeah,
so that we
okay.
can regroup on efforts for this and
Yeah,
put, because
and no, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I think it would be great if we, in tandem with the police department, come with a formal recommendation to the town.
Yeah, that's great. Now, is this something we can do, or the select board, or do we have to run a vote for the citizens? Is this something, Ian, what is that?
It's for the town speed limit on our town roads, at least in the village. It's just a select board decision. It does not need to go before the voters, as far as I'm aware. So that's why it's sort of nice that we are able to do that. And I think it does have support, especially for myself. And I think Joel is a big supporter of the speed limit too. He's mentioned it a number of times in meetings over the last few years to be able to lower that. But obviously we need the approval of all select board members in order to do this. But I think if the main thing you want to do is just have a very clear outline of what you're doing, obviously, you know, talk to Chief Nason and have him in agreement with this and have an understanding of what it requires to do this. Make sure that legally we can do this. And I think we can, I think we've established that, but it would be, okay, how many signs are we swapping out, you know, and how long would it take to do that? Do we need to order signs? What that cost might be? You know, there is money in the budget in the Public Works Department, and I'm sure in other areas, but you want to have an understanding of, okay, we want to do this, and what does it mean to do this?
Yeah. So with us not having, with the state with 116, which is great to go ahead with just the village, there'd have to be some kind of signage to separate the 116 from the other ones too, or some kind of a, you know, so people know the difference. Because it'd be confusing. People on 116 would see 30 and then they'd see 25 on everything else.
Right, and that's probably something that Chief Nason can speak to in terms of doing this as a separate thing or doing it together. And that might be, you know, it is only one road that goes through the town that would have those same speed limits, or rather different speed limits. But it would be up to him. I would get his recommendation on if it would be all right to do it as two different things, or if doing it together would be a better way of handling it.
Okay. I'd be willing to go with you, Chris, to help out with that.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, so we will proceed accordingly on that. Anything else on the speed limit topic for this meeting? Okay, so the next one is the liaison list, which Ian just told me that he had some issues getting into the OneDrive link. After this meeting, I'll go in and make sure all those links are good or updated and forward them around. There is a list, there's a spreadsheet in there that lists out all of the various sundry groups that definitely have a stake in safe biking, safe walking, everything from civic organizations to clubs like the Bristol Mountain Bike Club, through to obviously the police department, the schools, and organizations like that. What I'd love is anybody else to fill in any of the other organizations that we feel like we should have some kind of direct outreach or flow of information to and from to those groups, because in a lot of cases they will prove to be, or they should be, great partners for us. In other cases, they're going to be great sounding boards and places where we can get ideas from. So I'll maintain ownership overall of the list to make sure that I get the actual contact information there. But I just wanted to take a minute and remind everybody of that document. And I'll send a link again at the end tonight some point. Go in there and fill in any other line items of any other groups that you think we should reach out to in some way, or at least establish some level of contact with. Has anybody taken a look at that, or does anybody have any comments on that?
I did. No.
Okay, we'll jump to the next one. The AARP walk audit. This was a document that was forwarded to us between the last meeting and this one. I've put it in the references folder. It's a pretty interesting piece that basically outlines how to go about kind of rating and ranking and auditing the things like crossings and sidewalks and bike lanes and things like that. Given that there's already some initiatives that have some momentum by them, two of which are on this agenda, the traffic calming for Pine Street, as well as the speed limit thing. This AARP audit is still a pretty interesting tool for giving us, like, I don't want to call it an unbiased or a purely objective view of things, but it gives us a nice starting point for looking at things. I haven't cross-referenced it with the work that the ad hoc committee did, so I'm not sure if they had any kind of if they were influenced at all by it, but thought it was a neat piece. It's in the references folder. Take a look at it. If somebody wants to volunteer after they've taken a scan of it, or a couple people want to volunteer to go in and maybe think about using that as a way of looking at both the village and the town, because I think one of the things that we're going to do, and I don't have it on the list here, but it's something that we should definitely talk about for the next meeting, which is coming up with a mission statement for the group. We have to understand, obviously, that the health of the bike and pedestrian situation is not limited, obviously, to the village. It extends to the town. And I think that audit thing might be equally illuminating when we start to look at the town as a whole and some of those roads, which are obviously completely devoid of, in a lot of cases, any kind of a shoulder or bike lanes or anything like that. So take a look at that. I'll in a follow-up email that I'll send out, I'll ask to see if anybody wants to. It's probably a good divide and conquer kind of a thing, as far as whether it's part of the village to town or something like that. But I'd love to hear ideas on how if people think it's a valuable tool, and then therefore if anybody wants to take on committing to the audit.
Chris?
Yes, Jerry.
Chris? There's two of them. There's one that's the worksheet for the toolkit, and one's the actual toolkit. Which one did you put in there? Because one gives all about pictures and description, and one's actually a worksheet that you would go to each intersection and fill out a questionnaire kind of thing.
I put in the toolkit. I'll go back and look at. I'll go back and look at.
Yeah, there's actually a worksheet that breaks it down that you can. It's probably, let's see, about 16 pages. And it just gives ideas, how you can rate rating, observation, comfort and approval, sidewalks, cross street intersections. It kind of is a tool to check off things, to see what's happening at each intersection of what you're doing.
Got it. I found it now. I'll download it and put that in the
I think,
the references folder as well.
There's a lot of information with AARP about this stuff.
Yes, this seems like a nice baseline to start from. You know,
Yeah.
and anything else that anybody finds or is familiar with in your own travels, your own work would be great too. The more objective starting points we have for our ideas, I think the better.
One thing I want to add too, we know Pine Street's a big issue, and that's something, but the big loop for Bristol, there's on Deveno Lane in front of our house, there's no sidewalk or nothing. That should be kind of thought or considered to be part of that. Maybe you don't have to do it right away, but it should be the second on the agenda, because if I'm coming off of Mountain Street, before the big S curve coming down, there's no sidewalk, and that's always people coming down fast down the hill. So that should be on the agenda too, to have the lanes, you know, the pedestrian bicycle lane should be put on that one too.
I
But I
like,
think that's you.
go,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I
I
was
think
gonna
that's
say,
the
I-
only two.
Mine
Go
is
on.
trivial. Mine is trivial.
What? Go
No,
ahead.
go, you go. Mine is trivial. My
But, you know,
comment is trivial.
walking the big loop, the external part of it, that's the two spots that has no sidewalks whatsoever. You know, and then the section on, I always forget the last street by the horse rink. There's a little section there that has no sidewalk too. That
Right,
those
yeah.
are the three parts on the main loop going around town that needs that lane. So it's not just Pine Street.
From the horse rink to Pine Street on Liberty.
Liberty, there you go. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks,
Ian,
Dustin.
Ian's raising his hand. Ian.
So something that might dovetail with this would be a sidewalk inventory. And I don't know if it's something where it's the purview of this committee to work on that, or if it's something that you might work on together. I've put in the chat a link to a survey that Virgins had done a few years ago and how they developed it. So essentially it was an inventory of sidewalks on town-owned streets, and then its recommendations on how to improve the walkability and the connectivity of the town. And I think we could apply the same thing for Bristol, and you're already doing that, just speaking about the sidewalks that we don't have. But I thought it was sort of nice the way that they developed it. They were able to get high school students to sort of walk some of the sidewalks and say what was missing and the various sort of conditions of the sidewalks. And they did a sort of a nice interactive Google map where you could actually choose all the sidewalks and be able to see missing areas, uneven asphalt patch, moderate cracks, things like that. And I think that, you know, something like that for Bristol would be incredibly useful, not just for your group, but for the town as a whole in terms of the Department of Public Works and being able to sort of manage the sidewalks and update, you know, streets and things like that. And so in that link, it sort of gives you the information. It has the interactive map as well as the survey that they would take around, and you would mark it down, and you could, you know, residents could do this, or volunteers, you know, from the school could do this. And there's even ways you might be able to do it on your phone in terms of being able to walk and use Google Maps to drop a pin to be able to be in a certain area, and it could be right there. But it's something that I'd like you guys to sort of think about.
That's great. I just clicked on that link. It looks very interesting.
Yeah, it has a lot of detail. And we just had a meeting yesterday I attended, and this is for a scoping study. We have two of these happening this year, both for sidewalks. The first one will be on Munsell, Du Bois and King. They're doing that. And so a scoping study is essentially sort of figuring out what you can put there and how, and if it's going to be accepted by neighbors or by the town, and what the costs might be. And then the next stage, once you have your scoping study, and you might have a few options coming out of that scoping study, then you'd see if you're, as a town, you're able to implement that in some way and find the money. But we have one happening for Munsell, and then there's also one for Airport Drive as well.
Okay, so Ian, that's good to know. Ian, kind of dovetailing off of what Jerry mentioned about Deveno Lane, how was Munsell picked for that study?
I think it was something that was, town administrator Valerie Caples, she walks the town a lot.
Mhm.
And it was an area that she noticed that she walked, that I think she noticed a bunch of other people walking as well, given that it's close to sort of it's sort of a school kind of connector, depending on where you live, as well as being very connected to Bristol Works and the various businesses there. It just seemed like that was a good spot. And I think the select board had a number of areas where we don't have sidewalks, and that was sort of put up to the top of the list to be able to get that scoping study. And oftentimes it's grant money that we apply for to be able to do these scoping studies.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting, Jerry. The thing that I was going to comment on, and it actually comes from where my question about how Munsell was picked was, you mentioned the big loop, which a lot of people call that the big, when you're walking the edges of the village, that Devon Lane is where you you cross the street to do the biggest walking loop. And it's interesting because what is it, Liberty Street has it's like 2/3 of it has a sidewalk, and then the sidewalk basically stops at the bike path over to Mount Abe, which I would consider, Jerry, I don't know about you, but I consider Liberty part of the big loop.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and this group, I think, will be very useful and influential in terms of being able to support things. I think in the past, because we haven't had a group like this, it might have been individuals that have mentioned to the town, and we've sort of kept notes on that. But to have a group that's sort of looking at this and can be able to present things, like I think even just the idea of like the big loop, I've never heard that before. I mean, we're all sort of familiar with it. If you live in the village or live in and walk that, you know what that is. But if you can present something where it's like, well, we'd like to make this safer, we'd like to make this better, and saying like, okay, here are some key areas that we'd love to see scoping studies done for sidewalks, or if there is already some sidewalk that needs to be added to, that seems like a more simple thing. Even just that kind of information presented to the select board, I think will get a lot of good traction.
Great. That actually segues right into our next topic, the Pine Street Traffic Calming Initiative. Ian, we're glad you're on the call, especially for this one. This seems like it's well down the road. The money's been budgeted for it. Is there anything from our end that we can do once spring comes, or whenever the time was allotted to do this, that we can do to make sure that it actually happens during this year? Or does it have the momentum it needs, and it's gonna happen on whatever schedule it was supposed to happen on?
I think you need to just solidify what the ad hoc group did and presented, and just make sure, work with some of the more professionals that were part of that group, that was part of their job, to sort of look at this and just confirm again, through this group to the select board, like, this is what we'd like to see happen. And have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and just make sure, because I think that the biggest thing in terms of my learning as being on the select board, the clearer and more concise and precise plan that you can present to the board, the better. If we have to ask a lot of questions about it, it's just going to take longer. But if you come prepared and you know exactly what you want to do and want to have happen, and you can present it in such a way, then I think it's a much quicker thing to have. It's been approved in terms of, it was very supported when the ad hoc committee presented it, but I think you want to have it as an official thing now. You're presenting that and saying, okay, here's what we'd like to have. This is the recommendations for the sizing. This is where we need to have signage. All of that, I think, needs to be done by this group in order to move forward.
Got it. Okay. Does anyone want to be the in-house champion for the traffic calming on Pine Street? Jerry.
Yep.
Perfect.
I'll work on that. One question: who does the painting once we get it going? Is it the town does it, or we have to bring somebody in to paint the white lines and the bicycle with the arrows and pedestrian thing in the lanes?
I'm not entirely sure. I know when it was presented, Eric Coda, our road foreman, he talked about bringing in a separate company to paint the lines, and I don't know if that was Pine Street specific, or if that was more of something on North Street when the proposal to have those bike lanes put in.
Okay.
I think we only have a certain amount of equipment that's usually used for just crosswalks and things of that nature. I think something of this sort of size and just the distance of it, I think it might be a separate group that needs to be hired. But that money was put in this year's budget, which is July 1st. And so we just have to sort of, present what you need to have happen, And then also probably figure out, I don't know if we can, probably working with Aarp, maybe present and then work with Eric to figure out who they might hire to make this happen.
Okay.
Great. Anything else on Pine Street that anyone wants to discuss?
Yeah, just on Pine Street, one thing that I think is an issue with it, I think the bike lanes, pedestrian lanes will help a lot to calm the traffic, but there's also, if you're coming from North Street and you go down Pine, cut over to Liberty to get to West Street, which a lot of people, high school students driving from Moncton to get to Mount Abe, they're aware of this. If you go that route I just said, from north, turn down Pine, go Liberty to miss the traffic light in town, there's not a single stoplight slowing you down along that route, which is why a lot of people will do that to cut through. So it's an issue because it's, the road's a little unsafe anyways, because it's narrow, you have a lot of pedestrian traffic, and there's not a single stop sign to slow down the cars. So I think it would be helpful to put a stop sign like, where Munsell joins Pine. It's a little bit of an unsafe intersection anyways, just because of the grade of the, where the building is kind of high, and the stop sign set back. And the other spot is right at the junction of Pine and Liberty itself. I'd personally like to see that be like a three-way stop, because that's where myself, because I actually live at the end of Pine on that, like the very end of Pine, right across from the town garage on a private drive. So I'm going around that intersection quite a lot. I've almost been hit by cars a lot along right at that intersection, because there's just a lot of things that are, cars don't see you and they're used to not stopping along there. So that, in addition to the pedestrian bike lanes, what I would suggest for Pine Street, what I'd like to see is a stop sign at where Munsell joins Pine and at the Liberty Pine intersection.
So the one coming from the dump then,
Yes.
Okay.
Ian, on something like new stop signs, do we start with Eric Coda? Where would we start that conversation?
I mean, he's part of the equation. I think you would it might be something the select board might ask. They would definitely ask in terms of the detail and reasons why you wanted to do it. And Dustin just sort of presented the reasons to us. It also is beneficial because you're creating the pedestrian walking lines on a highly traversed road, and you're trying to make it safer for both, bicycle and pedestrian access. Putting stop signs in a couple of key areas helps the speed limit tremendously in terms of cars slowing down. So both of those things, they benefit each other. So that strengthens your case in terms of, presenting it. I know in terms of, Eric's point of view, obviously he's at the end of that road, and they're traversing it, and the road crew are traversing it a lot, especially during the winter time. And so that's going to affect, and he's going to have opinions about that. But it's, you're free to make your suggestions and your reasons and see what the select board says. Obviously I'm supportive of anything that can slow down traffic. I'm not a fan of traffic and cars in general, especially in this downtown setting. So, I'm definitely supportive of those things. And I like that idea. And maybe it's something where you present the idea of putting two in, but maybe one is approved. But at least that starts you along in the right direction to be able to get that road to be as safe as it can be, given its current, limitations.
Great. Kevin, comment?
Yeah, my comment, I agree with everything that's been discussed. If you look at the straightaway and thinking about breaking it up, I'm just going to throw out the idea of maybe having the stop sign be at the end of Maple Street. Geographically, that might be challenging. There's a house right there, but that would break it in half. And then I agree, if there's one put at the end of Liberty, again, it gets people stopping twice. I don't know if that'd be an easier sell with the select board to justify it. I agree with Dustin, the intersection with the big building at the end of Munsell is really challenging to see for people coming out of Munsell. Right now with the snowbanks, well, when we had snow was really challenging. But my point, getting back to it, with the long straightaway, it's more in the middle. I think that'll help slow people down even more on the eastern end of Pine Street.
I thought about Maple too. Where Maple joins Pine, I feel is a little safer. It's a little better line of sight. Maple's a little wider. There is a sidewalk on Maple that goes right to Pine. The Munsell one, just the nature of that building there and the high grade of the ground the building's on, and where the stop sign set back. I mean, if you're walking west on Pine Street along that side of the road, even at the stop sign, the vehicle doesn't see you. So that's why I thought that one might be a better one.
Even just by putting a stop sign there, less people probably travel on that and stay on North Street.
Yep.
Because it slow them down, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
A thing that I might suggest then is putting a third one closer towards Jackman Drive, maybe at the end of Taylor. Split that whole straightaway into 3 sections. Again, I don't know if the community, the select board would agree to that, but going from Munsell all the way to North Street, it's still a long straightaway and people are gonna go fast. As the driver's ed teacher for Mount Abe, as soon as people turn onto Airport Drive and they see that straightaway, it says 15 on the sign, but it doesn't matter. And even going through the gate where you're supposed to yield, it's one of the longest straightaways in town, just like Pine Street. And that's where people are gonna drive fast. And I would, not to get too distracted, but going down North Street, similar. Going down North Street, people can see a long distance from Pine Street all the way past Plank Road, almost to the top of the hill near the greenhouse. So those are let's go fast because I can see and just go.
Ian?
So a couple things. Again, for the stop signs, I would involve Chief Mason, get his opinions on that. I think they would be very valuable. Obviously, he wants to see speeds decrease and traffic speeds decrease in the village, in the Mill Village. And the second thing I might recommend would be to, if you're considering this, and I think it's a good plan, is to speak to the homeowners on Pine and get opinions from them. You know, it's a more involved thing to do in terms of go door to door and ask people, but just it's a way to get more backing for this particular suggestion. You know, and also again, it gives you an opportunity to talk about the other work that you're presenting in terms of putting in these lines for pedestrian walking. And I think that's another thing that you then can present to the select board. I mean, we're the 5 members are here to listen to the residents of Bristol. You know, they vote us in, and we're here to listen to them and take suggestions and hopefully make living here as nice as possible. And so we're always open and willing to look at things like that. And I think it presents your case better too, by having neighbors who can speak to that and say, yeah, it'd be great to have traffic slow down. And I think stop signs would really help. Or no, it's really going to bother me because I need to commute, and, you know, get as many signs as you can. But again, it's having that information and being educated about the areas that you're speaking about. You know, the last thing I think that the select board wants to do is put in restrictions or make changes that a greater majority of people don't like in the town. So, you know, we're always very aware of that. But there you go.
Well,
Sorry, Jerry.
after we talk to Chief Neeson, then we can, well, I'm talking about Pine Street, we can hit the residents and talk to them. We'll have a better idea what he thinks too for stop signs, and then have a better idea instead of just general. I can do
Tanya,
that too.
Great, terrific. Tanya, your question about other stop signs, I think now's the time for us to get our list together. Like if we're thinking, I go back to Jerry's comment about the big loop, and that might become a part of our platform that we're thinking about. We're trying to think holistically about the village, obviously holistically about the town as well. But when we think about the village, that loop gives us a nice starting point, but I don't think any of our actions are necessarily exclusive to it. So Tanya had a question about should we consider other areas that might benefit from stop signs as well in this thing? I don't see why we would necessarily limit ourselves to considering them, at least at this point.
Start small, but think big.
Yeah, great point. Great way of putting it. So if that's it on traffic calming in general, the next one is just a quick one, item number 6, the Vermont Walk Bike Summit is coming up. Someone sent us a note about this. It's coming up in May, so it's a few months off. I just wanted to get it on everybody's radar. I'll make sure as more information presents itself, we'll get it into the references folder, and we'll be sure to start talking about potentially attending it as it draws near. I don't know if it's happened before. I don't know if anybody here has been to it before. If it has happened, has anybody heard of it before this?
I did something in Burlington years ago that was something like this. It was a big group thing from all over the state. I went as a representative of EBT, but it was quite a few years ago. But
yeah.
So it's been ongoing. It's a good thing.
It sounds like it. It reads like it's going to be a good thing. So we'll, in the next couple meetings, we'll formulate a plan for attendance if some of us are going to go there. Next up, item number 7, Jerry, if you wouldn't mind, since you're the one that this one is really written around, the grant writing that you had unearthed some. You know, nothing formal. No heavy.
Well, when I was on the neighborhood watch, the chairperson for that, when we did grants, it was pretty simple. You fill out a few forms and you got the money when you had a good reason. But I went to the Aarp grant and I sent a copy. Did everybody get the copy? Yeah, it's a lot of pages. It was confusing for me because other than the simple grants I wrote years ago, it was above and beyond what I could. There was too many questions and I was confused about stuff. So is anybody on the committee did grant writings that would make more sense?
I've had a little experience from Five-Town Friends of the Art, my work with Five-Town Friends of the Arts, with grant writing and grant giving as well as some other organizations. And I've also got some inroads into the gang that got the grants for the pump track. So which would merge right in well with our stuff. So I think there's at least a workable body of knowledge where we could get something going.
Okay, because the grant needs to be turned in by March 22nd, so it's pretty quick. And the grants usually range from about 11 to 15,000. And there is a section just for biking, pedestrian. We just have to prove it's also included for people 50 plus. So I'm in that category. So there it is. I mean, but it might be something, an avenue to try if we can get it written in time to present it. But again, like when I was saying, I looked at it, I was just confused. There's too much information that I didn't know answers to. So but we do have to act pretty quick on that. If we don't do it this year, we can apply because it's done every year for the last, I think, 6 years. They've had this grant for the community improvements. So
does anyone want to join in with Jerry about brainstorming ideas of what we would use a grant for, what we could write grants around? Or grant applications around, pardon me.
I'm happy to work with Jerry on this, but I have never had a grant writing experience before. So I would be happy to craft language, but I think it has to be looked over by someone with much more experience than I have.
I didn't do it yet, but I thought I could talk to Porter. She's a great grant writer, and I'm sure with our relationship, if she has time, she might be able to give her 2 cents and help out that way. So I'll contact her this week and see if she's up for helping us, Marianne, and maybe fill in the little boy. The only thing on the grant, there was things like tax numbers and stuff and who we represent. Ian, I think you might help us on that of, what kind of organization tax status we are. And there's some things I just don't know. And maybe you as a select board member would know that you could fill in those spots for us. Is that possible?
Sure, I can take a look. We can speak to Valerie too, and she'll know the
And if
details on that.
if Valerie wants to contact me, I can come in and talk to her and she could fill in those parts. That would really be great help.
Okay.
Kevin, you have a comment?
Yeah, my commenter, I would like to be involved with thinking about potential usage. The piece that comes to mind right off is the educational aspect. Educating the community, educating children, obviously the young drivers, but also the senior drivers on how to manage it. And a thing that comes to mind too is the signage. I know there's already talk about that, but there's gonna be some fees for that. So what will that look like? So trying to make that greater connection at the elementary school level, the middle school, that education process. So with that, it's going to be money, but it's also just making that connectiveness with the district. Maybe that's Katrina DiNapoli, the assistant superintendent, to have that process.
So anything else? That's awesome. That's great. I think that's what we want right now is like what kind of, in the next couple of weeks, brainstorm ideas on what we would be writing grant applications for, and we can formulate a plan for how to write it and get it in. I think again, I've got experience in writing these, so I can certainly assist with that. Porter will be, I think she'll be a fabulous resource to tap for any number of things, not limited to grant writing, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tanya, for your offer.
Oh, I was thinking about, where the school crossing areas, we haven't had crossing guards in a while. I don't know if that was something that that VES or the school district had been previously paying for, if it was done with volunteers and then they couldn't get volunteers, or the process to get volunteers. I don't know exactly what happened to the crossing guards, but if a stipend for someone to do it was an issue, maybe that's something that could be gotten through grant money. Or if not crossing guards, or maybe in addition to crossing guards, like I don't know what you call the posts with the lights on them that just
that would be great.
stand out a lot more than a sign, where there's a school crossing, like at where Spring Street is in North and Fitch in North. Those two locations in particular.
I think that flashing crosswalk would be great. Then it's no matter who, we don't have to have somebody standing around waiting for the kids. They can just push the button.
Push a button and then it stops. It turns to a light, and it can be a flashing orange or something during certain hours, possibly when we know there's going to be a lot of crossing.
Yeah, Ian mentioned his own experience with getting the town's first one installed, and I think Ian probably has a good grounding in both the process as well as the budgets for that. And Ian, were there any other, if you're still, I see you're still here, but if you're still available, were there any other areas? I think maybe you mentioned the Spring Street / Pleasant Street across North Street as one of the potential areas for that.
Yeah, I mean, so the first one we had put in, which was the one right in downtown by the bank. So I spearheaded that just through Bristol Core, just knowing that that was a dangerous area, especially in darker evenings and being right in the downtown. There will be one put in over by the fire station going across the street to the hub and the rec fields. So that's already in process. The electrical and infrastructure for that has been put in, and we're actually just waiting for the actual equipment. It's behind in schedule now in terms of delivery, but that should hopefully go in the next couple of months. And then I think the ad hoc committee made the suggestion of putting one at North and Pleasant and not Spring. Yes, Spring. And I think that's a good area to put one in, especially given the school route right there. One of the things that we were told when we were the select board was asked to develop like what kind of device to put in and where to put them in was just if one of the suggestions I think from the engineers working on it was just that you don't want to have an abundance of these through your town where they sort of become people tend to try to ignore them. And I don't know if I agree with that. I feel that because it's a flashing thing, I think people pay much more attention to that than just a static sign. And yes, anything you can become just sort of numb to as you're driving through, but at least you have that visible signal that's constantly changing because of different timings of people crossing the street. So I don't think that Bristol needs a ton of them, but I do think there are some key areas that they would be really useful in. The fire station one, I think because of people coming up over Stony Hill and the speed at which people come in. And then Chief Nason and the police department is really working hard to get in speed signs and make the messages interesting and changing those messages so people are paying attention. But I think these crosswalks also help a great deal as well.
The crosswalk by the hub, it doesn't go anywhere though. I mean, it just goes to the fire station. There's no sidewalk over there or anything. Why are you putting it there?
No, there's a sidewalk there. So part of the Stony Hill Business Park and part of what the town did was build infrastructure for water and road and sidewalk. And so there is a sidewalk there now. What it does is it will connect to the sidewalk that comes down from the hub. And that little area there goes straight across, goes past the Nelson property on the left, goes past the fire station and down into the new business park development.
The new business park, okay.
Yeah, so there's, initially the big building, the first building that will be built will be for an already established business there. But at the same time, or probably not at the same time, but probably maybe a year later, would be the firehouse apartments buildings be put in. And so the sidewalk is also supporting that as well. But that's all in. It's kind of buried or was buried under snow. But that's why that was put in. So it will be this sidewalk that sort of goes to nowhere for, probably at least a year as that development gets going. But afterwards, I think it'll be highly traversed, especially to go even to the trail network back there.
How much are those? What does it cost to put those in?
They can vary. It depends. I think they're probably in the maybe, I'd say the high end would maybe be 5,000 or 6,000 to put those in. And it depends. You can get ones that are solar based, which have more sort of infrastructure onto them, with panels. We tried to get them where they were electrified, but that means putting conduit and running stuff underground. That won't happen for the one by the fire station. So that'll be solar. But I know that the select board seems to prefer a cleaner look where you don't have the panels on top, but that is a more expensive option given that you have to go underneath roads. So I think the solar ones are okay, but it is something that the select board has looked at and seems to prefer a more electrified version of it versus the solar.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, so let's move on. Other business. I have one item. I mentioned it earlier, and I'll start drafting options for this in the interim. Is a mission statement that we can present for approval or for consideration by the select board. I think it'll give us. I've got a bunch of notes from the application process, from the first meeting, as well as from this one that I'm going to fold into a variety of options that people can chop up, have at it, comment on, question, append, whatever. But I think that I should have had it on the agenda for this one so that we could get moving on it. I think it's important that we have that because it's going to give a lot of our efforts grounding, give people an understanding of, everything from the big loop to questions about the plank road, the plank road stop sign and things of that nature, about the duality of what we're trying to do, duality seen from through the lens of both bicycles and pedestrians, town and village, as well as safety and this idea of it not just being a safe place to walk and bike, but also a great place to walk and bike. So that's kind of where I'm going to be heading. If anybody wants to send me any other ideas or things like that, that we should be considering at the draft phase, I'll wind those in, and then we can workshop them or continue the discussion in the next meeting. Does anybody else have any other business that wasn't formally listed on the agenda for this week? Okay, I jumped the gun on the review and approval of the meeting minutes. I forgot that we had this down the list on the agenda, so we've already done that. Last up is a public forum. I see we've got some other people, some community members. Thank you for joining us on the call. Does anybody have any public comments, questions, or anything like that? I don't see any hand raising. I don't see any comments in the comment or chat function. So let it be noted that there were no public comments for the forum. Does anybody else have anything else we want to discuss or need to discuss? As I mentioned, Ian pointed out that it seems like at least a few of the links to the share are broken. I will make sure tonight to go in and resend those links so that people can gain access to those. Please let me know as soon as you can if you're still having trouble getting into those. Anybody else have anything else before we adjourn?
Did you like that crosswalk, that 3D crosswalk I sent you from Iceland?
I've seen those before.
I love it.
Love stuff like that.
Can you imagine it though? We'd be lawsuit. People would be crashing or stopping and thinking, but I loved it.
Is that a real thing? I thought it was. Like,
yeah, in Iceland, it makes people. I mean, is anybody hearing a gun going off?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm at a baseball practice.
Oh, okay. All right. That's no worries.
Strike, so my son had a baseball lesson.
Oh no, that's no worries. I just make sure it wasn't a gun going off. Yeah, but it says in Iceland, and no one in Iceland knows. They must do it. I mean, it was great. One suggestion. Let me just throw something out there. We're going to paint crosswalks. Paint things for crosswalks. Wouldn't it be great if we got like the high school art department or the class to paint murals in the crosswalk instead of a green, or making it look like a crosswalk to give some color or pizzazz to it? I don't know if it would make people wonder what they were or not, but
I know, Jerry, I know other communities that have done that. I'll do some digging into, because obviously those things have to default to certain rules and regulations, but that hasn't stopped, or it hasn't prevented people from taking more creative approaches to crosswalks. So I'll do some digging on that in the interim.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool because people would smile when they'd see a crosswalk, or they wouldn't go, oh God, just give some color to the town and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like when they paint all those electrical boxes, like in Burlington. I mean, it's so sweet. You see them, you look for them.
Yep.
It's always nice.
I love that idea.
Yeah, good.
I have a question about the budget. I'm not sure how much budget is in that will be approved starting July 1. And how much are we allocated to spend? Are we spending all of it? And how does that get parceled out throughout this year that we're going to be coming into?
Technically, you have no budget. The budget is part of the town budget. And so the money that was budgeted, at least beginning July 1st of this year, is part of the Public Works budget. And that was additional money was put in for markings, road markings and things like that. Some of the sign money might come from the police department, also might again come from Public Works department. So there's no official, like a lot of the committees, unfortunately, there isn't much of a budget for the committees. And usually the stuff that committees sort of present would come out of a town budget, or the select board would look for grant money to be able to support endeavors that you wanted to do. Obviously, it'd be nice to give departments or give committees' budgets. And again, it's something that you can present to the select board and say, hey, we're doing these things. It'd be nice to have money to be able to do this, and we can look at that and see how that could fit into the next year's budget. But we're always sort of a year behind just because of the fiscal year and where that falls. So it gets quite complicated. But at the moment, yeah, the money that is available for you in terms of some of those projects falls in the town public works budget.
Okay.
Cool. Good question.
So if there isn't anything else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Seconded?
Second that motion.
Great. Well, I thank you all for joining this meeting, especially members of the public. Look forward to, Mary Ann, seeing your first professional approach to our minutes. I will follow up with some emails around the share and as well as a couple other things. In the meantime, forward anything to the group email around the next agenda, any of the items that we discussed in this one.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great meeting.
Thank you. Great seeing you all. Stay
Bye,
warm.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Toodles. Toodles.
See you later, everyone.